Hi, I'm Ravi Agrawal, host of Foreign Policy Live, your weekly fix for smart thinking about the world. From global conflict to great power competition, the world order is clearly in flux. And then there's Donald Trump. So, how do you find the signal in the noise? I'm here to help. Each week, I sit down with the experts on the issues that matter most to you. That's FP Live, wherever you get your podcasts.
Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
Can I make my site softer?
Can I make my site firmer?
Can we sleep cooler?
Sleep Number does that. Cools up to 8 times faster and lets you choose your ideal comfort on either side. Your Sleep Number setting. Enjoy personalized comfort for better sleep night after night. It's our Black Friday sale. Recharge this season with a bundle of cozy, soothing comfort. Now only $17.99 for our C2 mattress and base, plus free premium delivery. Prices higher in Alaska and Hawaii. Check it out at a Sleep Number store or sleepnumber.com today.
A science story, huh?
These NYU scientists,
I
felt
right.
I was so
And I just thought, well,
I had figured it out.
It was that golden moment.
Because science was on my side.
Hey everyone, and welcome to The Story Collider, where true personal stories about science help us explore what it really means to be a human. I'm your host, Misha Gajewski. In today's episode, both of our storytellers find themselves in those impossible moments when you have to say something no one wants to hear, when the truth itself feels heavy and words don't feel like enough. These are the kinds of conversations most of us spend our lives trying to avoid, the ones that test our empathy, our courage, and sometimes our sense of who we are. But they're also the moments that connect us most deeply to one another. Let's dive in. Our first story today comes from primatologist turned science communicator Stella Mayerhoff. Her story is recorded in Atlanta at our go-to spot, Waller's Coffee Shop. Here's Stella.
As a child, I loved Saturday mornings. I would run downstairs and I would look through our collection of VHS tapes. And I would search one by one with each tape, passing up every 90s kid's favorite movie. Matilda? No. The Sandlot? No. The Lion King? No. Until I found it. A documentary all about ocean explorer Jacques Cousteau. Now, this may have single-handedly ruined any chances of me as an adult winning 90s trivia. But the countless mornings that I spent watching that movie instilled in me a love of adventure and animals. I would sit mesmerized by Cousteau and his crew as they ventured out into the ocean. I was in awe of all of the animals that swam across my TV screen. Now, don't get me wrong, The Lion King is a fantastic movie, but this documentary was real life. Years later, when I went off to college, I still loved animals, and so I decided to take a primate behavior class on a whim. Suddenly, I was transformed once again into a child, completely enamored with the idea that scientists got to travel around the world, studying incredible animals in incredible places. I decided that I wanted to do the same. After I graduated from college, I went to work with bonobos in captivity for a year. Now, bonobos are often described as being very similar to chimpanzees, and in many ways that's true. They are primates, they're also a great ape species, but unlike chimpanzees, they're relatively peaceful animals. And also something particularly interesting about bonobos is that females run bonobo society. Needless to say, I fell in love with them. I quickly decided that I wanted to study bonobos in the wild. I was committed to it. However, bonobos only live in one country in the entire world, the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is home to some of the densest forests in the world and also a place where fieldwork is particularly difficult and dangerous. But if Cousteau could venture out into the oceans and study sea creatures, I could cross rivers and travel through the forests to study bonobos. I decided to apply to my dream job, studying bonobos in the wild. I was hired to work for a project in the heart of the Democratic Republic of Congo, at a remote field site where I'd be studying social lives of bonobos. Before I left, a professor of mine told me, "It will be hard in ways that you could never imagine." I came to terms with the fact that it would be the most challenging thing that I had ever done and possibly would ever do. I wanted to be as prepared as humanly possible, and so I packed everything I could possibly fit into my bag. I had enough medication and first aid supplies to fill a small pharmacy. I bought medical evacuation insurance, which explicitly stated that they would bring back my body even if it was in pieces. I reached out to former field assistants and got their advice so that I could face any challenges that would lie ahead. I wanted to be as ready as humanly possible. When I left for Congo, I quickly realized that just getting to the field site would be an adventure all on its own. It took 2 days just to get to the capital city of Kinshasa. And from there, we took a tiny little propeller plane across the country and landed intentionally in a field. I was met there by the field site manager, and from there we walked for 6 hours. We crossed 2 rivers and took a dugout canoe part of the way until we finally arrived at camp. At any given time, there were roughly 10 people or so at camp. Each one of us stayed in a tent, and our only source of water was the river. We also had one somewhat functioning solar panel that we would use to charge our equipment. And once a day, we would be able to send out text-only messages via a radio satellite email system. The work was brutal. We would wake up long before the sun got up and walk an hour, sometimes 2, just to get to where the bonobos had slept the night before. And then the bonobos would wake up and we'd actually start our day. They would go everywhere through the forest, and we would follow them up cliffs, across rivers, through the jungle, wherever they went, recording their behavior and what they ate, taking fecal samples and urine samples, all to better understand some of our closest evolutionary living relatives. The forest was also nothing short of relentless. We would chase after the bonobos through the forest, and we would get scratched by these vines that had a sandpaper-like texture, and they would scrape us through our clothing. And then later, when we exposed those to the sun, they would burn because of a photosensitive chemical left behind by those vines. On a daily basis, we got attacked by driver ants, which are known to have such strong, large jaws that they're used in the villages as makeshift stitches because they will clamp down and close a wound. Wow. Early on in my experience, I ran into an elephant that was flapping its ears at me, which is a sign that it was very much time for me to run as fast as I possibly could. One morning, before the sun came up, I was walking with my headlight, and I saw it reflect back to me in a pair of huge, beady cat eyes. And I watched as a leopard slipped away quietly into the forest. Another day, I narrowly missed stepping on a boomslang, which is one of the most venomous snakes in the entire world. There were so many things that made it difficult, but there were also so many moments that made it incredibly worth it. There were days that the bonobos would take us to the most beautiful parts of the forest, and they would rest for a little bit, and I could take off my backpack and sit down, and I'd look up, and above me would be a group of baby bonobos playing and tackling each other, swinging fearlessly through the trees. It was absolutely incredible. My favorite moment of the entire time was one day when I was walking, and the group of bonobos that I was walking with decided to slow it down a little bit, and I realized that everywhere in front of me were bonobos just walking. And then I heard something behind me, and I turned around, and I realized that the rest of the group, which had been trailing far behind us for most of the day, had finally caught up with us. And suddenly, I was surrounded by bonobos in every direction around me, peacefully just walking alongside me. It was the closest thing I had ever experienced to real magic. One day when I was at camp, a stranger arrived from the village, and this was very abnormal because the village was several hours of walking away, and so people didn't just casually walk into camp. The man explained to me that he was looking for Nora, and Nora was also from the same village. He was a local that was hired for the project. And I knew generally the direction that Nora had taken into the forest, but beyond that, all I knew was that he was somewhere out tracking the bonobos. But I had been tasked with finding him. So I filled up my water bottle, I put on my backpack, and with another field assistant, I set out into the forest. As we walked, we would periodically stop and make a long call that we called a whooping call. And this was something that we used in the field to be able to communicate very far distances from one another. And so we'd walk, and I'd stop, and I'd let out a call. Woo! But I didn't hear anything. I walked, and I let out another call, but I didn't hear anything again. After nearly 2 hours of walking, I finally heard Nora return the call. We bushwhacked our way through the forest until we were able to find Nora. Once I saw him, I told him the news. Votre bébé est très malade. Vous devez retourner au village immédiatement. Your baby is very sick. You need to return to the village immediately. But that was a lie. The truth was that Nora's baby had already died of malaria. The man from the village had told me to tell Nora that his baby had only been sick because Nora still had to make the walk all the way back to the village. We walked in silence. Deep down, I think that Nora knew. There was something about the way that he stared at me without responding to what I had just said, and then abruptly took off for camp. He walked so fast that I could barely keep up with him, and I was grateful for that. I wasn't able to think about what had just happened when all I could think about was putting one foot in front of the other as fast as I possibly could. And it occurred to me that Nora was probably doing the same. When we got back to camp, Nora remained silent. He packed up his things and he left for the village. The moment that he was out of sight, I had tears streaming down my face. That night I wrote home. Today I lied to a father so that a false sliver of hope would get him back to the village, make him go the whole trek back to the village where his wife would tell him that his baby was already dead. Looking at my watch, I realize he knows by now. He has made it back to the village and his entire world has shattered. I thought back to what my professor had told me. It will be hard in ways you could have never imagined. She was right. I had imagined dealing with the psychological pressure cooker that is remote fieldwork. I had imagined using up all of my medical supplies. I had imagined being so tired and sore from running through the forest and chasing bonobos and crossing rivers that I could barely move. But I had never imagined that day. And I realized that the only way to adequately anticipate what lies ahead is to realize that you can never adequately anticipate what lies ahead. But the field also taught me that that doesn't only hold true for the bad things. It holds true for the good things too. Just as I will never forget walking so fast behind Nora that day in the forest, I will never forget walking peacefully through the forest with bonobos walking around me in every direction. It's been 7 years now since I left Congo, and to this day, when people tell me or ask me what it was like, I still don't know how to answer. What I do know, though, is what it taught me. That even through hardship and the most unfathomable moments of heartbreak, there are moments of magic. I'm now in my final year of my PhD program, studying primate behavior and cognition, and it too has been hard in ways I could have never imagined. But I know now to look for the glimmers of magic, and when I do, I realize that once again, I am surrounded by the things that I love. And it's wonderful in ways I could have never imagined. Thank you.
Oh, that story breaks my heart and really shows that you can't ever prepare truly for what life is going to throw at you. To learn more about Stella, visit our website, storyclatter.org. Being a storyteller on stage is just one way to make Story Clatter happen, but not everyone loves the spotlight, and that's totally okay. If getting up on stage isn't your thing, supporting Story Clatter as a donor might be the perfect way to get involved. Now, more than ever, it's vital we hear the voices of scientists and science communicators. At Story Clatter, we believe that true personal stories can break through the noise, bringing science to life, building trust, and helping people connect on a human level. But we can't do it without your support. Our donors are a big part of what makes this work possible. They help us produce the podcast, share meaningful stories, and spark the kinds of conversations that stick with you long after they're over. If you believe in the power of science storytelling, consider making a donation at storyclatter.org/donate. Most people give $10 a month, and every tax-deductible donation, big or small, helps keep Story Clatter going strong. Thank you for being part of our community. You've probably seen the headlines about cuts to foreign aid this year and the real concern they raise for people in some of the world's poorest communities. It's hard to know what's actually happening or how to help. GiveWell, this episode's sponsor, doesn't claim to have all the answers, but their team of researchers is analyzing the effects of these cuts in real time, identifying highly cost-effective ways to save and improve lives, and sharing what they learn for free. Over 18 years, GiveWell has directed more than $2.5 billion from 150,000 donors to the highest impact programs they found. Rigorous research suggests those donations have saved over 300,000 lives and improved millions more. You can explore all of GiveWell's transparent research at givewell.org. And the best part? Thanks to the donors who choose to sponsor their research, GiveWell doesn't take a cut from your tax-deductible donation to their recommended funds. If this is your first gift through GiveWell, you can have your donation matched up to $100 before the end of the year, or as long as matching funds last. To claim your match, go to givewell.org and pick podcast, and enter the Story Clatter at checkout. Make sure they know that you heard about GiveWell from the Story Clatter and get your donation matched. Again, that's givewell.org, code the Story Clatter to donate or find out more. Our next story comes from Sam Blackman, a physician scientist and pediatric oncologist. His story was recorded last year in Seattle in the Jewel Box Theater at the Rendezvous. Here's Sam.
I'm the firstborn child of a Jewish pediatrician. And for the first 10 years of my life, I was all in on both. I was the kid who was raised conservative, but when he was 8 or 9 would walk by himself to the Orthodox temple down the street because conservative just wasn't enough Jewish. I was the kid with the chemistry set in the basement. I was the kid who wanted the leftover surgical instruments that my father had at his office. When people asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I said I wanted to be a doctor and a rabbi because, of course, you can do those two things together. And then in my teenage years, when I got a little bit older and saw what both of those things meant, they both disappeared. My parents split up because my father's relentless focus on work alienated him from his wife and his children. And it destroyed my faith in religion, and it destroyed my desire to be a physician. And when I was 18, I fled New Jersey for the Midwest as an agnostic, soon-to-be philosophy major, burning down everything that had happened to me in the nearly 2 decades prior to that. And at the University of Chicago, God is not allowed in the philosophy department. It's not. It's logic. It's reductionist. And belief was not an argument. You can't substantiate the assertions that you're going to defend by just saying, I believe. And as I went deeper and deeper into this reductionist hole, I came out the other side wanting to be a scientist and wanting to be a physician, but not like my father. I wanted to be a physician scientist. I was 20-something in the age of PCR and molecular medicines and molecular biology, and I firmly believed that I was nothing but the sum of my genetics and epigenetics, and that everything about who I was and what I thought was just the sum of an infinite number of synaptic connections and neurotransmission. And I worked, and I got into medical school, and I got into graduate school, and I went through and came out 8 years later as a physician scientist, non-believer, focused more than anything else on wanting to take care of children with cancer. And I started that journey in, of all places, Cincinnati, Ohio, a city that I didn't know very much about, was artificially transplanted to courtesy of the National Residency Matching Program, and thrown into my intern year, which was a meat grinder unlike anything that I had ever experienced, on call every third night, trying to balance the needs of patients with the needs of science. And as I went further and further into this, I had discovered that this job was impossibly hard sometimes. And midway through my second year of residency, I not only didn't have faith or religion, but I was questioning whether or not I even believed in myself as a doctor. I found myself, after endless nights on call, short-tempered and impatient and frustrated. I did a oncology rotation in the middle of my second year, and on morning rounds one day, we came to the room of a patient who had been admitted overnight, a little girl named Brianna, who had, without a doubt, the worst brain tumor ever. She had this tumor that grew inside a structure at the base of her brain. It could not be removed. And all of the treatments that we had were ineffective. Radiation doesn't work. Chemotherapy doesn't work. There was nothing for her. And she had been in the hospital for a number of weeks and had chewed through, her mother had chewed through previous teams. Her mother so angry because she knew that there was nothing that we could do. And when I started that rotation, started that month, we'd get to the room and we weren't allowed to go in. And I said to my attending, why can't we go into the room? And he said, Brianna's mother doesn't want us to come in, doesn't want us to examine her. I said, how are we supposed to take care of her? Well, we'll look at the labs and we'll look at the nursing record from overnight, but, we'll just sort of, wing it. What are we going to do? From time to time, Brianna's mother would come out and ask us to do things. She didn't believe in science, and frankly, why should she? Her child was going to die. There was nothing that we could do. But there were things that she wanted us to try, and we would negotiate these things with her. She didn't like the fact that we had to give high doses of steroids to reduce the swelling caused by the brain tumor. And she wanted to substitute that with homeopathic remedies. And we said, no, we couldn't do that. She didn't like the fact that Brianna was always plugged into IV fluids and said, can I give her herbal teas instead of all the IV fluids? So we said, yes, you can. We don't have a problem with that. She came out one morning and said, can we give coffee enemas to Brianna? And I said, what? And my attending physician at the time said, I've never heard of this. And he turned to me and goes, is this a real thing? And I said, he goes, go to the library and find out where this comes from. Not because we're going to actually do it, but I think we were just so curious. And so I went and researched where this belief in coffee enemas came from. It's this thing called Gerson therapy, which parenthetically is not real science. But I came back and knocked on the door and explained to Brianna's mother why we couldn't give coffee enemas, that I had gone to the literature, I had actually looked it up, and I laid out the reasons why. And because we had listened to her, because I had gone and taken her request seriously, she did something remarkable. She let me into the room. And for the rest of that month, we would make our rounds every morning. And I would be the one person who was allowed to go into the room and examine Brianna and talk to her mother about the plan for the day. And I was feeling like Brianna's doctor. But rotations only last for about a month in residency, and things end, and you move on to the next thing, and I moved on. And a number of weeks later, I was out. I had a night off with my wife. When I got a call on the way home, I got a page from the nurse from a unit in the hospital called the Pavilion, which is the place where the palliative care patients would go at the end of their lives. And the nurse paged me, and I called back, and she said, "Hey, listen, we think Brianna's going to die tonight, and we know that you were close with her mom. Do you want to come in?" And I was a little scared because I'm just a second-year resident, and I'd never attended a patient's death before. So I dropped my wife at home, and I called the on-call attending, and I said, "Hey, listen, there's this little girl, and she's got this horrible tumor, and she's probably going to die tonight, and I have no idea what I'm doing. If I go into the hospital, you come and meet me." And he said yes. And we both got there around 10 o'clock at night. And there's something really remarkable about hospitals at night when all the lights are out and it's very, very quiet. And you walk through these halls and you get to the end of the hall, and there's a room and all the lights are out and there are monitors on. And there's nothing you can do. So I thought. And my attending said, there are things that we can do, right? We can give pain medicine to make it easier. We can give oxygen to help reduce the agonal breathings. We can bear witness. And that's what we did for hours through the night. And sometime around 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, we were standing out by the nursing station. And the nurse came out and said, "I think Brianna may have stopped breathing." And my attending said to me, "Do you want to go and pronounce her dead?" And I said, "I don't know what to do." And he taught me, because there's a ritual. And so I went into the room, which was all dark, except for the monitors. And I performed the ritual. I took my stethoscope and I placed it on her chest, and I listened for a full 60 seconds for the absence of a heartbeat. And I put my fingers on her wrist and felt for the absence of a pulse. And I looked at the clock and I made a mental note of the time of death. And I said to Brianna's mother, "I'm so sorry for your loss." And then I went to leave. But before I left, I turned and I said, "Is there anything I can do for you?" And she said, "Would you pray with me?" Now, I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm the firstborn son of a Jewish doctor who doesn't believe in God, who just believes in science. And I'm being asked to pray over the body of a dead child. And my every instinct said, say no and leave, because I'd be lying to myself, and lying over the body of a dead child seems like the absolute wrong thing to do. But in that moment, I realized that Brianna's mother believed me to be the doctor that I had wanted to be, had hoped to be. And so I went back to the room, and she closed her eyes, and so I closed my eyes. And she held my hands, and so I held her hand. And then she started to pray. And fortunately, she said words of a prayer that I had heard only a few times. But fortunately, I knew. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Thank you.
What a beautiful story. If you'd like to learn more about Sam or hear his other stories on our podcast, visit our website, storyclatter.org. Our website is just one way to connect with Storyclatter, but there are so many other ways, and we hope you'll use them all. You can always follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Head to storyclatter.org to become a financial supporter. If you're interested in coming to one of our shows, starting a Storyclatter show in your own community, or even learning how to tell your own science story, you can find everything you need on our website. And if you love this podcast, tell a friend. Share an episode, introduce someone to Storyclatter, and help bring more people into the world of science storytelling. This podcast is produced by me, Misha Gajewski, along with Jen Chen, Nikisha Roberts-Washington, and Aaron Barker, Executive Director and Co-Founder of the Storyclatter. The stories featured in today's episode were produced by Mesa Saleta, Emma Yarbrough, and Kent Whipple. Special thanks goes out to Storyclatter's board and team. Our theme music is by Ghost, and next week we'll be back with an animal-filled best-of episode from our archive. Until next time, thanks so much for listening. Looking for a podcast to help you survive and actually thrive this holiday season? Check out All the Hacks. All the Hacks is hosted by Chris Hutchins, a financial optimizer who's been everywhere, literally. He's traveled to 60-plus countries, racked up millions of rewards points, and sold 2 companies. And if you're like me and planning to travel over the holidays, you've got to check out the Airport Lounge episode with Kevin Song. It was so useful. He breaks down exactly how to access the best lounges, even if you're not flying first class, shares underrated perks, and gives you the inside scoop on how to actually avoid crowded lounges. I'm definitely going to be using all these tips and tricks this season and anytime I travel. All the Hacks is full of practical tips you can start using right away, plus the guests are always great. You'll hear from people like skateboard legend Tony Hawk, 3-time Olympic gold medalist Kerry Walsh Jennings, and a whole roster of scientists and experts who are on top of their game. So do yourself a favor, search for All the Hacks, that's All the Hacks in your podcast app, hit follow, and start upgrading your life today.